Okay, and we're live. Whoop, my slides are already jumping ahead. Welcome to our webinar on tips to maximize sales team's performance. Super excited to have some amazing speakers with us today. We have George from Scrive, the Sales Enablement VP from Scrive, formerly VP of Sales. We have Sara, who's the VP of New Business at Implema, and Douglas from Foleon, the VP of Sales. So we've got the Swedish Mafia with us today. I'll give each of them the opportunity to introduce themselves briefly, but before we get started, just some quick housekeeping things for the audience. So as we're doing our introductions, it would be amazing if you could also introduce yourself in the chat. I'd love to hear who we have with us today, your role, where you're dialing in from. Location is always interesting. If we've got any people from the other side of the world, it's always great to hear. So please introduce yourself in the chat, and also feel free to drop in any questions you might have as we go. So I'll be moderating the session. My name is Bowen. I'm the CEO here at Wonderway, so I'll be moderating the session. And I've got some questions prepared, but of course, if you have any that come up during the session, please drop them in the chat, and I'll try to address them as we go. But if I get lost, we can also take them at the end. But please be interactive, jump in as much as you like, and we'll try to include you in the conversation. So with that housekeeping finished, let's hand it over to the speakers to introduce themselves. George, would you like to start by introducing yourself and talk a bit about the company you're from, and maybe it would also be interesting to hear some context about your career, both as a seller and then also the teams that you're managing, so we have that context for the rest of the conversation.
Sure. So my name is George. I'm working as a VP Sales Enablement for Scrive, e-signing and EID provider out of Stockholm, Sweden. I've been in sales for the past 20 years. I've done virtually all commercial roles from SDR, BDR to account executive, senior account, head of enterprise sales. I did 3 years as VP Sales and Customer Success. Teams varying from 12, 15, 20 people at times. And now I have the new assignment has to do basically with the topics that we're gonna touch on today, but spreading across the entire revenue organization, around 60 people, 65-ish, where we are. And I've done sales for the last 7 years. I've been in sales. Okay.
Yep. Oh, we lost him.
He got kicked out.
Did he?
I can take on while we wait for him to come back. Yeah, we lost George. George is lost. We can keep going until he comes back in, so I can take over. So Sarah's my name, and also Implema is the company name. It's hard to pronounce, I know, for everyone who isn't Swedish. Don't ask me why we're called that. And Implema is a 25-year-old company working within the tech industry. So we provide ERP projects and ERP solutions. So that's the company side. And then on my side, I work as VP Sales. My job at Implema right now is building up an entire new biz organization, because they haven't been forced to do new biz in 25 years, which is interesting in itself. We will get to that when we talk about the questions. I've also been in sales for over 20 years now. So my entire career, I fell into it by accident, and I just fell in love with the profession. And I've also done basically all the types of roles you can have within that type of organization when it comes to commercial. And I've also run my own business for a couple of years where I did sales consultancy around sales strategy, how to do a sales process that actually gives you revenue like you want it to be predictable. And I've also worked a lot behind the scenes with the organizations I've been at, training sales teams in how to enhance their skill sets. And I've also had teams at up to 20 people, and now I'm going to build a team here. So I don't have a team right now, but that's my background. And I'm also super nerdy with sales, so this is going to be so exciting.
Nice. Well, yeah, I mean, I'd love to, as we go through, I think it would be interesting to get your thoughts, like, you know, as maximizing performance, both from like a individual contributor role, so as a salesperson, and then also motivating others to do it. I think it's good to have both perspectives in this conversation. And George, I think you got cut off there. Would you like to?
Yeah, I was not to round off. I was pretty much done. So we talked about commercial roles. We talked about where I am currently. I think that's about it. I will get plenty of time to speak later, so I'm good.
I think something maybe to point out, that something that I really like about your current role, George, is that I know we've been talking recently that you've just switched out of that VP sales role into a VP enablement role. So I think it's a really interesting switch that hopefully we see more people doing this, like moving, I think often enablement sometimes, can fall to like more junior people in the organization. But I think when you take someone out of the VP sales role, put them in enablement, there's so much more credibility around this role, and like really like making sure that you're getting people to believe in what you're saying. And I think being able to then transfer those skills across the entire org with 50 sellers is a super powerful move. So I know you're early in the journey, but I'd love to hear how that's going as we go through. So Douglas, last but not least.
Sure.
Yeah. I saw that Charlie is also from Amsterdam. So I'm Douglas, north of Amsterdam, VP sales of Foleon. We're a content creation platform with offices in Amsterdam and in the US. Also worked in the US for a couple of years. I set up our office there for 3.5 years and recently came back. Also did a short stint at Apple, also for sales. And before that, I owned my own business in retail. I'm also really a sales nerd, just like Sara. So I love sales. It helps if you're a VP of sales. And I also love enablement. But I still didn't make the leap like George made. However, that could be my future path, to be honest, because I think one of the things that I like to do the most as VP sales is really training and coaching my reps and make them better, develop them, and see them really progressing their careers.
Yeah, a very rewarding switch. I have to admit. After I don't know 3-4 years trying to carve out time from operational topics to build coaching routines and stuff like that, getting to nerd out as we're talking about this into the minutiae of process and methodology is super cool.
Yeah.
Cool. And a fun fact for those in the audience is George and Sara are actually married, and they're taking this call from the same room, just across the room from each other. So if you hear an echo, that's where it's coming from. Cool. And just looking through the chat, I see we have people. We have Peter joining you from Hamburg. We've got people from Amsterdam. We have Lisbon, Cape Town, Berlin, Poland. So we've got people from all over the place, which is great to see. No one dialing in from like a crazy time zone. I think sometimes you have people calling in from Australia and stuff like that. But yeah, at least everyone's roughly in the same time zone here. So let's get cracking with the first point. So I think, again, the topic for today is tips to maximize the sales team's performance. Now, this is quite a broad topic, very broad, very general. But what I would like to do is especially focus on how we can maximize the team's performance in this current environment. I think everybody knows we're in the middle of a recession. It is a particularly challenging time, I think, to be in sales and also to manage sales teams. And I'd like to start the conversation off by talking about what are some of the challenges that you've got when it comes to sales performance right now in this environment. Like, what is it unique about 2023? Some of the challenges you've got unique to right now that you maybe haven't had to grapple in the past. Maybe.
Can I jump in straight away? Can I just?
Please.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
So because we've been talking a lot about this, because the way we see the market right now and the way it's evolving and the challenges that are up ahead are very much tied to that we're all basically selling now to a C-level group and mainly to a CFO. We haven't done that before. It's a big shift for most salespeople because most salespeople don't have people like us in their teams building how to do sales well, because we have too few VP sales enablement people, and we have too few managers who actually have time to spend with their reps to make sure that they have a good messaging, to make sure that they understand their market, to make sure that they have a niche and very clear ICP to work against. All of these things are things that we will feel now, because we can't sell the way we did before, which is basically, here's a script, here's a computer, we have all these systems, have fun, just follow the script. It doesn't work anymore for the simple reason that we're not selling to people who have a lot of money anymore. We're selling to people who need to go to a CFO and get approval for a budget that they would normally just say yes to, or not even be involved in the conversation about. And I think one of the challenges with this situation is how we view it. So a lot of sales teams and sales leaders now are sort of freaking out because performance is going down and we can see it, but they don't understand why, because they haven't spent time reading the market either the last couple of years, because the market has been good, right? So if you're in a management role now, and it's your first management role, and you've been in there for 3 years, you have no idea how to deal with the situation that's going on. So one of the challenges is understanding how we can verticalize, also go against specific verticals much more clearly, understanding what's going on in their market. And another typical thing that I would really advise for people working in sales enablement right now, it is to actually choose a few verticals, create a proper ICPs for them, and then tell salespeople that this is your vertical now. Read everything you can about it and interview people that are in that vertical so that you understand what's actually going on for them. Because we're not just addressing people now who are afraid of losing their jobs. That's an actual fear that some of these managers have. And we're not addressing them like that. We're addressing them like, but of course you want to buy this product that will solve and give you 300K extra a year. No, that's not really my problem now. I have other problems. So understanding that, I think, is super important. And as a VP sales enablement or a sales enablement manager, to try to get your managers, the people who actually coach your teams ongoingly with you, to understand that they need to now start choosing verticals and ICPs to be really good at. Because if we don't, this will cause us much more problems in the future. That was my starting take on that.
That's awesome. I think there's a lot to unpack there. Maybe we can save some of it for the next part where we'll talk about solutions. But I especially really like this point around the managers not necessarily knowing what to do in this environment either. If you've risen through the sales ranks over the last couple of years, we've all been selling in an easier environment. I mean, most people, unless you've been in sales since before 2007, 2009, you haven't had to sell through a recession. I mean, maybe COVID is a blip, but yeah, I think it's really interesting. Like, where would you, this is definitely a challenge for me. I've never sold through a recession. Where are you looking to get advice here in this? Like, if you haven't been, assuming you haven't been through it yourself, maybe you have, but where are you looking to get advice for how to navigate this this current situation we're in?
Well, so looking at from our perspective, when it comes to Implema's business, what we're doing now is we're creating ICPs, and we're also interviewing our clients and people in those industries that we want to target. So we're narrowing ours down to just a few chosen ICPs, ideal customer profiles, verticals. These are the verticals we need to address. We need to address them so tailor-made that it feels like we actually understand. And to be able to do that, we have to actually understand. So we're interviewing, we're looking at having focus groups for these managers that we're trying to sell to have them tell us what they need from us right now. And we're also looking at our tech stack to understand how that can support our ongoing setup that we have now, because it's not good enough yet. We have a bad tech stack for even doing any type of tailor-made content, as an example, which is a necessary thing here. So my advice again would be to go back, and I keep talking to customers. Like, that's my source to understand where they are. And I think that's not a sales enablement lack we're doing. That's just a lack. We're not doing that in companies overall. We're not talking to the customers about these topics when it comes to what's happening for them. We're not reading enough. I've been in so many sales teams where I've both been working with training and also been working as a leader, where we will put time apart every week to actually read about the industry you're supposed to be good at. And I don't know what your experience is, but that's not a very common thing to do. And that's also something you can put into a systematic program for the sales teams. We can actually put them in programs to learn about their industry. We can support them with content to learn about their industry. We can support them with time to learn about the industry. We can also support them in booking lunches. And I think just having lunches with your prospects ongoingly to talk to them as a salesperson, that needs to be encouraged by the organization. That's what you need to do. You're not going to sell to the lunches you have. You are going to interview them, because then you will know all the things you need to know within 2 months. And that's also a ramp up discussion. So when you hire a new salesperson in this environment now, getting them up and running fast has to do with giving them clear directions to how and what they should be communicating to who. And again, ICPs come at play there as well.
Yep. Okay. Maybe sorry, jump in there.
Yeah, I think you hit a good point here, Sara. I think over time in the last couple of years, it was easy to sell. Well, or easy is maybe not the right word, but it was not that tough. Now it's getting tougher. And one of the traits that reps should have is like a genuine curiosity, right? That's basically what Sara is saying. Like, you need to be curious about the industry that you're selling to, the customers that you already have. Like, how can you use that customer information to go out and talk to your prospect? What's going on in their world, etc. And that curiosity is so vital. And for everyone here that has been an IC, that's what brought us to this level, right? We're curious about, like, okay, how can we sell this? How can we improve ourselves? How can we develop ourselves? If you have that intrinsic motivation and you create that curiosity within your team, then you probably already see that even without all the stuff that you should have there, right? So a clear ICP, clear regional segments where people should focus on, all that stuff, the good content. You can have that stuff, but if your team isn't curious, if they're not intrinsic motivated to go out there, you're not going to win. And that can be a challenge right now for people.
But can I just to add to this, to what you're both saying, actually? So when it comes to curiosity, it all stems from management, right? It depends on what type of profile we hire and what type of mentality do we coach later on in the funnel when we ramp up people, right? So intrinsic curiosity is for me the foundation for all sales process. For any successful salesperson that I've ever seen in my career. And just to not to challenge, but to slightly disagree with what Douglas was saying, I would rather say that, especially for SaaS, the last 2-3 years has been, it has been kind of easy. Yeah. We had the companies out there, especially the enterprise segment, having duplicates and triple stacks of the same systems that did the same thing. Just because people had so money was so cheap in the market. If you look at VCs, if you look at investment companies, that we just people just bought sort of good to have or nice to have solutions with no ROI proof, no ramp up period, no implementation plan, and things like that. So moving now into an environment where you need to address people with the methodology in mind, being consultative, helping them understand what risk they're running. Because let's take myself, if I'm implementing sales enablement tools, bringing a cost to my organization, I need to make sure, besides reward, I need to understand what risk I'm running, right, internally. So what is the cost that I'm bringing to my organization and how it is going to translate to benefit in the bottom line in the end of the day. So we haven't been, at least from what I understand, interfacing vendors, what I see is that we haven't been really coaching stage by stage in our sales teams. We haven't really been encouraging curiosity, what Sara was talking about, the lunches. I remember our previous CEO came to my desk one day, that was 5-6 years ago, asking me what am I doing when I was eating lunch at the office, and I couldn't understand what he meant at the time. It's like, yeah, you should never eat lunch alone. This is a waste of time. You should always be out with prospects when you have a lunch. And to the comment in the chat when it comes to remote teams, asking for virtual coffee when I started the previous role that I had, starting to sell with banks still during Corona, one of the first things that I did is I reached out to my network, being super transparent, and said, so I'm starting this new role now. I want to know what you guys are interested in, what your plans are, and without talking about the product pitch, just trying to understand the market and where people stand, basically. And it was 30 minutes at the time, essentially. So essentially, try to be curious, try to get informed about how your buyers world works and what is important to them.
Can I add another thing to this? Because I think this is interesting from a perspective of that we're talking about. So how do you get them to agree and stuff like that? This doesn't have to be new connections to you. This can be people you already have in your network. Like as a salesperson, and I've been selling to the Nordics for a long time, and a European for a few years, but still the Nordics a lot. And I have a bunch of network connections and also previous clients of mine in these roles. Nothing is stopping me from going out on LinkedIn, searching CFO or whoever I want to talk to, finding the industry vertical, and then just asking them, so, hey, coffee, it's been a while. Like look through and dig through what you actually have now too. But I think if we go back to the actual challenge here, which is the management encouraging this, and not just encouraging, but actually providing this is what you need to do. I think that's where we're failing, because when salespeople are being told what to do from someone who they trust, they will most likely do it. The problem is that no one is telling them to do these things. No one is giving them a framework or a frame for how they should do this to better understand. And as a junior salesperson, at least junior, if we're looking at some of these teams, they won't be able to figure this out themselves. They need us and their leaders to do this for them and tell them this is what you need to do. And that's most likely why so many of us have become good at sales, because we've had leaders, and when we didn't have leaders, we all decided, fuck that, I'm going to find my own mentor. I'm going to find other people outside of the organization who can teach me things. And that also comes back to who we hire. So are these people curious or not? Like going into interviews, sitting with salespeople to interview them for a role as a sales rep, and they have very few questions. And if they do, the questions are basic interview questions, if you guys know what I mean.
Yeah.
Then this is not the right culture fit based on what type of team you want to build, if you want to have a curious team. So hiring structures is also super important with this, but mainly management, to be fair.
Okay, so just as a moderator, I guess I'm just conscious that we're sort of going between already over to the next part about tips and strategies to increase sales performance. So maybe if we just take a second to summarize. Like I think we've talked about quite a lot of things, but in the current environment, I think the main challenges are that a lot of the stuff is changing. So the target market is changing, the ICP is changing. Need to be constantly reassessing who that ICP is, and then also who the buyer personas are within the target accounts. So I think, Sara, you mentioned that we're selling to new people within those accounts. The CFOs are involved, the procurement team, the executive team's involved. So reassessing who those personas are, what's important to them, things like people scared of losing their job, and really revisiting some of this basic assumptions that we had about who our customers were. And I think, building strong business cases there. And I think, I guess that's sort of moving to solutions. One of the key solutions here is to speak to your customers, speak to the customers yourself. Reps should be encouraged to do this themselves, but also the management team needs to take the lead to either be defining this for their sales team or giving the sales reps the freedom to do that. Have I understood that correctly? Is that like a good summary? Or is there something important that I missed there before we move on to this next slide?
Sounds good to me.
Maybe one thing that I was surprised that we didn't touch on so much was the like coming back to sales performance. What about like when it comes to motivating the team right now? What's the feeling with the team's motivation in this environment? Are you having any difficulties with the team motivation, or is that not a problem for you?
For me personally, we don't have that problem right now. We did have that conversation today with our CRO. He said, it's not about the motivation. It's more about the discipline, making sure that they do what needs to be done. And if they do what needs to be done, then performance most of the time will follow, and that will motivate them also intrinsically. But yeah, we don't have a problem with motivation. I think if I go back more with like what our the main issue sometimes can be is that because selling was easy, is like quantifying pain is still a little bit of a difficulty for some reps right now, and we just need to enable them more with the right stories. Like what will happen if our persona will keep doing the same thing, right? And how can we make sure that they don't stay at that indecision, just doing what needs to be done every single day. That is the problem that we are facing.
Okay.
Can I ask you a question there, because I'm curious? So when you look at your team, because you said something about not making a decision, right? Staying in status quo, that's a challenge. And that's a challenge for sales, I think. Any salesperson who's invested in their deals, which most are way too much, to think that this is frustrating, right? But I can also see, based on the teams that I've been working with, that we have a big challenge with actually doing things to move the customer as well. And I think that's also one of the challenges. So what type of structure do we have in place in our organization to make sure that if a deal gets stuck, because we all have data on how long a deal can be in limbo before we know that they're not going to buy, right? So that type of data, making sure you have dashboards that show that in the CRM environment, making sure that you can sort of catch these opportunities when they're scaling up, and have clear motivational incentive to doing things that is a bit outside of the box. Because we have a tendency, and I remember, and this is years ago, but I remember I had this very similar situation when I was a salesperson with a deal that I had been working on for months. It was an ERP project 12 years ago, something. And he just basically clammed up suddenly. So we had a great discovery. We had a great workshop when we looked through what they were needing, and they were on board. Like in everything that I could see, they were so on board. And then he basically just stopped responding to email, or responded very shortly, and everything was postponed, and he wouldn't tell me why. And I remember I was sitting being frustrated in front of my manager at the time, who was the country lead of that organization. He was just like, "So what are you going to do?" And I was just like, I don't know. I went home, I went to bed. I was lying in bed thinking about the fucking deal. What went wrong, right? So the day after, I went to his office. I went in and I asked the receptionist if he was there. And then I waited for like half an hour. And then I went into his office. I was just like, "I'm sorry. I understand the deal is dead, but I'm going insane not understanding why. Please tell me." And then he explained that it just got acquired of another company. So it couldn't move forward because then it was a secret. At the moment, it wasn't official. But going there and understanding that made me lead to a situation where 6 months later, when the acquisition was done, we could do business. But if I just let that go, and if I didn't have a manager challenging me, so what are you going to do? What are you actually going to do now? I wouldn't have, or I would have gone anyway. But I think it's important that we understand that when it comes to how we tell our reps to be in situations where they're landing in stale pipe, we need to give them clear guidelines to what is acceptable to do, and then say, "But fuck what's acceptable, do this instead." Because that's how you're going to actually get through the thick line of salespeople that are hovering these people right now. Because everyone has challenges selling right now, according to their own pipelines, at least.
I think this is
so
also
how do you guys work with that?
I think this is also connected to something you mentioned, George, about like coaching specific to deal pipeline stages, right? This is sort of in a similar vein here. Do you break things down by pipeline stages, and do you look at it in that way, or how do you approach the coaching?
Yes. Yes, it is by stage, and it's first of all, one of the first things that I understood when I went into management is that different people have so even if we train everybody the same, still we have people that are good at specific stages of the process, and then they need support in others. So breaking down your pipeline by stages, so looking at people that perform well in discovery, people that perform well at closing or contract negotiations or product positioning or whatever. I want to add to what Douglas and Sara have been saying now when it comes to motivation. Coaching stage by stage, and also for management to, especially this year, sort of lift their sleeves up and get into the trenches with their teams. So join meetings, attend team syncs, have like sessions where your teams can vent to you about things being stuck or being ghosted, or deals getting like sort of hanging at the end of the month, and try to find, as Sara was saying, trying to find creative solutions. Think a bit outside of the box and try to help out and coach the sort of the minutia per stage. on how to proceed, especially when it comes to managers that come from a sales background. You probably, whatever it is, if you have 10, 15 years in sales, whatever your team is interfacing, you very, very likely very likely have interfaced before similar situations. So looking at how the team performs stage per stage and trying to tweak which each account based on stage is quite important, I would say.
Yeah, 100%. And also to piggyback on what Sarah was saying, like, you need to have a plan, right? If you're working on a deal, it's not just following exactly that process, but you also need to understand what's going on the buyer side. That thing what Sarah just mentioned, yeah, you need to understand, like, hey, why does this happen? Why is this buyer at this certain point not interacting with me anymore? This is weird, right? You need to understand this is an anomaly. Then you need to go out there and not just say, like, okay, take this for granted, gonna put it on lost and go. No, if you put a deal on lost, you should get like a definite no. There's always a reason why people at a certain moment don't talk to you anymore. But you cannot just put deals on lost because of unresponsiveness. If that happens, I think it's a problem like more upstream, right? At the beginning of the sales cycle with your prospect, you make agreements on how you're going to communicate with each other. Is it through email? Is it through text? Is it through phone, etc.? You need to make sure that you have that connection, that you truly understand what's going on. You also need to understand that if a buyer needs more information, you're not selling all by yourself. You got an entire organization behind you. You got maybe people from analytics that can help you, product experts, maybe even your CEO or your CRO or anybody else. We just closed a deal where we said, like, hey, this person has some great information about a prospect that he wants to vent to our people. I just put him in front of our product folks and our CEO. People love that also. If you have those opportunities, do it. Sell as a team and not just as an individual.
And there's also another aspect of this that has to do with helping the sales teams understand how they can improve themselves. Because giving them framework is one thing, but having software in place that makes them allow them to record their own calls, to record their own videos, the meetings they have them actually sit down and feedback themselves out loud a few times with you will make them do it more. So this is all about sort of enabling them from a perspective of, so here are the tool stacks. The point of this tool is to make you better. It's not for us to monitor you. It's not for us to feedback you. It's for you to make us better. And then ongoingly encourage that behavior. Because at some point they will start realizing, but wait, if I do this for myself, I will hit my budget now, and I like money. So that's, you have to find whatever the motivation is for improving. And again, if they don't want to improve, then you've hired the wrong people. You've just hired the wrong people, because in this role, it's vital to continue to improve. It's vital for your sense of self. Because we're very connected to sense of self in sales, is my experience at least. That we're productive and that we're succeeding in what we do.
Okay. Maybe one thing that I wanted to come back to, I think, George, when you're talking about looking at different stages, like, what is, I don't know if it's that simple, but what are the key metrics that you guys are looking at? I mean, I know there's probably a bunch of different metrics, and maybe you could, as long as your arm, but like, what would you say is like the one or two metrics that you're really paying attention to, and that I'm paying more attention to that you might have been a year or two ago? What are the one or two things that you think are the most important things to be looking at here?
Yeah, so I'm looking at so it depends on the segment and the deal size, I would say, but the main things that I'm looking at have to do with stakeholder mapping. So there is a very easy correlation between deal size and stakeholder number. So involving too few people mathematically leads you to the deal hanging at later stages. Looking at follow-ups through your CRMs, and also, and this is my advice to managers when it comes to sales performance, not only looking at numerical reports, but like actually go into and see what quality of follow-up you're putting out there when it comes to post-meeting summaries, for instance, business cases. How do we help our customers proceed internally? So next steps, stakeholder mapping, number and quality of follow-ups, and then look at monitor sales velocity metrics quite closely. So average deal size, average sales cycle, and win rate are the things that I would look at personally.
Yeah, 100%. I think we also use the one is none sort of like analogy, whatever you want to call it, like one stakeholder on a deal, like, like these are the inspectable events, right, that you're talking about, that that this deal has a likelihood of close of 0 based on how you're handling this deal. But I truly agree, because like the things we measure, and Sara said, like, you need to have like conversational intelligence, right? Like you need to record the calls of your reps, you need to score those calls, and that's part of the quality. It's about the notes. Our sales methodology is SPICE, so we really look like, hey, did you fill out the situation, the pain correctly, and the impact based on all that? Is it information that you really got from your buyer, or is it something that you just put in because you assume that is what they mean, right? And challenge them on that stuff. And the rest is exactly what George is saying, right? A conversion rate through the funnel. Like not every rep is the same. Reps are sometimes indeed good in discovery, but they're not good in presenting the solution if you don't have product experts, or they're not good in negotiation or trading. Like you can see that if you really check individual reps and check through the funnel where it goes well, where it goes wrong. If they have like specific attach rate, if you see their AOV drop at a certain moment within the sales cycle, or just bump up, all that stuff is important. And eventually, for me personally, like a thing that I always look at is also forecast accuracy. And the reason why I look at that is because if you think about the pressure that salespeople most of the time have, right? People always have the feeling they start at 0 in the next month and the next month. I always try to get the pressure out of the people, right? Looking not at 1 month, but at 2 months ahead, that they can forecast. We have a very quick sales cycle, right? 6-7 weeks. We're not enterprise grade, but you need to understand, like as a salesperson, you can alleviate that pressure if you truly understand what's happening within your pipeline, and managing people on that kind of like insights. Yeah, that will give them the confidence that they can get to their quota, and that helps also with the motivation.
And also, I have to say that forecast accuracy is, for me, is one of the most important metrics. I used to have it as a tied to commission too, when it comes to the teams that I was responsible for. Because for me, forecast accuracy has to do with control over the process. It doesn't really matter how close the cycle is, because when we did the enterprise sales only, we had 9 to 12 months sales cycles. We're talking about companies with thousands of employees now. So, but knowing where because each even larger sales processes have milestones, right? So having control of your next steps, having control of where your process will land, and actually communicating with your stakeholders ongoingly is a measure of control. Controlling your process, being in charge, being proactive when it comes to your sales approach, instead of waiting for the customer or only reacting to what the customer or the prospect does.
Okay, awesome. So maybe just to paraphrase, I'm listening, taking notes as we go. I mean, something that maybe surprised me is that it sounds like you guys are looking more at, first of all, you're going in deep onto the deals. So like really looking at individual deals, individual next steps, listening to calls, reading emails, looking at how many people are attached. So it's going deep into the details, and then looking at more of this, like, I guess, predictive stuff. So like lagging indicators of deals being closed and things like that isn't enough. It's about trying to get ahead of deals and coaching people, trying to get a feel for what the forecast is going to be in the future. And the only way to do that is really to get across these smaller details of what's happening now. Is that the right? Am I hitting the right things?
Yes,
Yeah.
I would say yes.
That, Sarah?
No, yeah, but what I was going to say, because I think you're onto it, because I think it's very much into the details. I think sales is very much about the details. And I think typically we have situations where there's no VP enablement in place. The situation means that, okay, so we have a manager who's supposed to run the team who doesn't have time because they can carry some of their own quota. They don't have the opportunity to actually coach as much as want to unless they want to sit all nights looking at video recordings of reps. And I think that is a challenge for many reasons. We need to, in the sales enablement space, we need to actually take over deal clinics. We need to do the things, because we can sit from the outside looking at process very differently than a manager running a day-to-day operation can do. I think that's a big difference. And I think we lost everyone without Douglas in the call now. That's how it looks on my side.
Douglas is here, but I think we lost George again.
I'm still here, yeah.
We did lose George, but I assume he'll pop back up in a minute. But yeah, I think something that is something that's going around a lot since the recession started. Everyone's talking about doing more with less and expecting reps to work harder and stuff. But I think it's also just the same as expected for sales managers to be working harder, to be getting into the details. Maybe when you're hitting quota, you don't necessarily need to look into these details if everything's flowing smoothly. You can just sign your check at the end of the month. But I think the same goes for managers now, who I think there is a higher standard that's expected, to be jumping in and
I agree with
not
that.
taking things account.
But I also think there's another thing that we haven't really discussed now, which is important when it comes to sort of increasing sales performance. So sales performance, when it comes to how we are in meetings, how we set the milestones, how we control our process, at least my experience, I've met very few good salespeople who do this. Like very few. And I've been in a lot of vendor meetings where people have tried to sell to me when it comes to sales software and sales training software and stuff like that. And I think from that perspective, CRM as well, when you have a salesperson selling a software for sales that aren't doing an agenda check and an intro in the beginning of a meeting, very common, who are not doing the next step and having 15 minutes in the discovery call to do that, those are baseline things. And I think having a sales manager make sure that the team and the reps in their team, it's very hard to keep up as a person who's in the day-to-day. And I think we need to start looking at how can we optimize some of these things? How can we make sure we have the feedback loops in place that we need to be able to understand where is the rep failing? And also look at meetings, just sit down and look at recordings. I think so many salespeople or sales managers are not even doing that. And that's where enablement comes in to a certain extent, because we're here to not just provide tech tools to support or support with materials and sales cycle. We're also supposed to support in skill enhancement, because the sales manager is not skilled to do that most cases, if that makes sense.
Yep. Hey, George, you're back.
My connection is very unstable. I don't know why.
Okay. There's one question that I wanted to get to, which we haven't had time to do. Do you mind if we run over by 5 minutes or so to just tackle the last question, or do you guys have a hard stop? I think if the speakers can stay, hopefully also the audience can stay. But the last question I wanted to touch on before we wrap up was the role of coaching and training in improving performance. So I think we've already touched on this quite a bit. So we've already talked about like coaching reps through the specific deal stages. We've also talked about redefining the ICP and the buyer personas, and I guess that also comes with defining it and then training the team on that. But yeah, what other how do you see? I think maybe the main question I'm interested in is how do you see the role of coaching and training in an environment like this? In your teams, does this become more important because it's times of unease and things like this, or actually less important because everyone's kind of scrambling to try and fill deals in? Like, how do you see this?
I very much want to jump on that now. So it's there is a very famous sales training fallacy historically in sales teams. So if we're doing good, we don't need to train because we're doing good, right? And when times are bad, we don't have time to train because we're doing bad when we need to sell more, which ends up with most teams not getting any training at all and still be expected to reach quota, right? Training, especially in a market like this, is the most crucial thing that we can do. And I don't only mean sales enablement functions like we have at Scrive. I mean coaching on a head of a team lead or a VP level. Go down to your teams and coach stage by stage, because if we don't train when the market is changing, we're going to move so far away from how things are developing that our skill sets are becoming obsolete. It's so important to go back to your motivation question. Giving people the tools that they need to perform better at their jobs is something that will and feel that we're investing in them, both time, resources, tech stack, and also like hours of our time, like looking into stage by stage, what's happening to the deals? Why are people dropping off on the last stage of the funnel? Because if we think, and that comes from a sales rep's perspective, not from a manager's perspective. If you think that it's hurting me to go to my CRO, go to my CEO and report that my team will miss quota, the person that is missing commission and ends up on the red in a performance dashboard, it hurts their morale and it hurts their motivation too. So we need to coach a lot, and we need to coach often, and we also need to have a strategy on how to put these things together. What are we measuring? Why? And explain to people why we're doing the trainings we're doing. What are we trying to improve? So yes, I think it's more important than ever.
Sara, Douglas, maybe also your opinion, but I'd also be curious. So I think George is clear that I think the coaching stage by stage is probably the most important thing at the moment. Did I hear that correctly? And Doug and Sara, do you agree? And also, what sort of training do you think is most important right now? I'd be curious to also get your thoughts there.
Yeah, so I agree, right? So like if you look at professional athletes, they train more than that they really play, right? And we need to make sure that we train our people every single day and also give them the abilities to train. And especially how I see it, like sort of like micro learnings. So skills like negotiation, follow-up, mindset, what have you. And those are typically the things that sort of like fall through the cracks if I look at myself and my own team. So we coach them enough, we don't train them enough. We do train them on like the bigger picture and the things that they need to know, but we miss the finesse. And I think there's so much to gain if you train them on like those little things where you create the right habits, and then they're really gonna win. And luckily we hired a great enablement person at Foleon who helps us with that right now. But yeah, we miss that, and you see that if you don't do that, it will cost you reps, because you will burn through reps if you don't train them correctly. Because you get to that point, what George is saying, everything goes well, you don't train them. It doesn't go well, you don't have time for training, and then the reps just go. Because eventually, and I worked in the US, and I still have sort of like motivation. Like, yes, you love to work for this organization, you're close to the values, etc., but you also still want to make your commission, right? So at the moment that people cannot make that anymore, and they don't feel that they can develop themselves anymore, they just leave. And that's up to the manager, that's up to the organization. And enablement can truly create that bonding with the team, and also that motivation, discipline, and all that stuff.
I have three things, because I think you're onto something. We're training the holistic perspective of what's going on, but not the details or the small things that happen throughout the deal when you're going through the process with the customer. So the three things I would say, so we need to teach them how to train themselves. So teaching them in how to feedback their own performance in meetings and stuff, so that they also know how to do that, because the more they get into doing that, the more they will do it on their own. So training a feedback mindset when it comes to your own performance. And that can be driven by the next point, which also will keep reps differently. Talk to the junior people about their career. Most reps will not be at the same company in 2 years. We're trying to help you and base you for your career. We know you're not going to stay, but we want to make sure you go out into the world in your next job the best you can be over those 2-3 years that you can stay with us. talk about the long game as a career with them instead of focusing on what they can perform for your company now, because then they will start performing for your company now because they feel like you care about their career, not just the single year or 2 years where they're with you. And I think that's a conversation we're not having with sales reps at all, especially on a junior level as managers. And the third thing I think is when it comes to training, have people train the people. So what I did when I was at Vainu, I created an entire sales program when it comes to skill enhancements. We did everything from vertical training to basic fundamentals in sales. And we did social selling trainings, a lot of the selling trainings modules ongoingly every month. And we had people in the organization who were good at a specific phase or a specific activity train the other teams remote. So they had to start teaching, which meant they had to start writing down what the fuck they did, which meant that they also could communicate it, which we also could put into a playbook. So a person who's good at training other people are very good in sales normally. So the more they train other people in the organization, the better they will be at guiding and supporting a customer through a journey. I think those are the 3 things that I would sort of tip on. So teaching them to train themselves by doing it with them for a while. Secondly, talking to them about their long-term career and what you want to help them with, instead of talking to them about what they're going to do next month in budget. And thirdly, have them train the other people when they're good at something in the sales programs, the training programs that you guys set up.
Yep. Okay, so maybe the last question then before we finish, and then we can see if there's any questions. If anyone has any questions, please drop them in the chat now and we can pick them up after this. But Georgia, coming back to the point you made at the start, that there's never a good time for training. I mean, you hear this all the time that, oh, we should have done it yesterday, but I can wait until tomorrow. Something I always hear as well, that I think we have a little bit of a bias here with like the people that are on this call. Everyone's, I think, open to training, and, I think like Douglas, we're working together. George, we're currently talking about this separately. But what would be your advice for reps or managers that might be on the call who don't work in an organization that has this mindset? Like, how do you make people aware? Like, I think we all agree that training can help people's performance, help with motivation, help getting people aligned in difficult times. But if companies don't have that culture, how could someone change that from within?
Move businesses.
I think it is. It's the same. Like it's the same as informal leadership, right? So there is one of the main things that you can do is set up hubs, learning hubs within your organization. Even if it is not a large initiative supported within individual teams, you can still set up. For instance, in my previous team, we have read and learn sessions. So we would look at industry best practice together and discuss in a group and try to do ideation. So how do we improve specific techniques, for instance? And if there is no such culture within your organization, you can create smaller groups, and then once that shift in performance is visible, you can push an agenda upstream. I would say to convince the organization to invest more in training. I would say. But it's not something in sales teams, if we're not continuously improving, so when your skill set scales up, we're going to fall behind. It's quite evident from all organizations I've ever been in. When we stop training, we start falling behind. So we need to invest in our people, and we need to invest in our teams if they are to even believe in investing back to our companies, right?
Douglas, Sarah, anything to add to that, or should we switch to questions? I think you're on. We can't hear you, Doug.
No, I have nothing to add.
Okay, we can't hear you, Douglas.
Douglas does, but apparently he's either muted or something is wrong with the sound, because I see his lips moving, but nothing on the sound perspective.
Maybe just so let's try and finish on the hour. So 5 minutes left. Let's switch to the questions. So I think there's 3 questions, then we cap it here, and maybe you guys can take one of them each to save the time. So one question from Peter Lombos was just a lot of managers would like to spend time coaching the team, but they spend most of their time reporting. Do you think that they're actually under pressure on this, or is it just an excuse? Who'd like to take that one?
Yeah, I think that obviously there can be situations where it's not an excuse, but looking at reporting in itself. So if you have problems because you have to do reporting too much, then you have badly built dashboards. There's a fix for this. So this should not be a reason if you're spending so much time that you can't coach your teams. That doesn't make sense to me, because you can build dashboards in your own CRM. Like, you don't need to, this is not supposed to be something that will take most of your week to do. So I think that's mostly an excuse, but I do think that they don't really know where to start sometimes. So I should coach, but I don't know how to make a structure for it. So I'm sort of gonna not do it. I think that's the problem instead.
And the second question also from Peter was around how many hours do you spend coaching on a weekly basis per rep? So George or Douglas? Maybe George, if you want to take this one, because
I can take this one, because it's otherwise we still don't have sound, Douglas. Okay, so per rep, usually there are team sessions, so we're looking at 1 to 2 hours per week in team trainings, and then an extra hour per rep. At least that's what we used to look at in the teams that I was responsible for. The old famous one-to-ones, right? That it is like we are accustomed to running, which usually constitute of asking people to report things that are already in the CRM. I would very much say that it's we should spend that time, if you have an hour per rep each week, have them prepare topics that they need help with, and spend that time coaching instead. And if you have problems with reporting, instead look at RevOps, look at BizOps, look at improvements in your systems, because a manager's job should not be to be a channel for reporting upwards. That's not what we're here to do.
Okay, cool. Peter's just dropped another question in, but I think we should actually wrap up there in the essence of time. I think we're already 15 minutes over. So
connect.
Peter,
We can connect on LinkedIn, and I can answer later.
Exactly. So Peter, please connect with us on LinkedIn, and we can continue the conversation there. And Douglas, sorry we lost you at the very end, but thank you so much. It was a great session. I think, sometimes when you do this, it feels like you have to draw it out, but here we've gone over. I was trying to work out how I can contain the conversation. So thanks for the spirited conversation. Super, super good. I can see that you're all very passionate about this topic. So yeah, I loved it. And also you can see that most people stayed until the very end, even though we ran over. So great session. Again, please everyone feel free to connect and follow up. Yeah, I'll let you finish the day and get to your evening. Thank you, Sara, Douglas, George.
Thank you all.
Speak to you later.